Welcome, everyone, to podcast number 19. My guest today is author Cindy Lora-Renard. This is our fourth podcast together, and today we're meeting to talk about her latest book, Heaven is Now. But if you go to her website at www.cindylora.com, on her store, you see that she has a number of CDs for sale and some other work that she's putting out. Cindy has attended numerous, and she's organized numerous events. She's been speaking throughout the world about A Course in Miracles and many of her books. Have you ever wondered why love and fear are mutually exclusive and why these two states don't coexist? Well, Cindy's about to tell us. And we're also talking about sickness and how we perceive ourselves, why it's important to not identify ourselves with our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions, because we're none of those things. We're much more than that. Please join me in welcoming Cindy Lora-Renard to today's episode. Welcome, everyone. Cindy, it is such a pleasure to have you back on our podcast. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Gabriela. I always love talking with you in our conversations.
You wrote a wonderful book, just got printed not too long ago, and it's called Heaven is Now. So I'm going to start by asking you, is this a permanent state, Cindy? Are we, our thoughts, our emotions, our ways of being, our roles that we play?
We are definitely not the roles that we play, and that includes our personalities. As far as many people think that our personalities are very real, which they feel very real. We're very identified with them because that's part of the ego, is to be identified with the personality. One could say that's how we function here. And in that sense, it's needed, but it's only needed temporarily because it's not a permanent experience. So we are way beyond our bodies. We are perfect love. We are perfect spirit, whole and innocent. That's our true nature. And that has nothing to do with form. So that has nothing to do with a wall of flesh, which this body really is. The body is nothing in and of itself. In and of itself, it's nothing. But we can certainly become identified with it to such an extent that we start to look to the body to save us. And the body is not what is meant to be saved because it's impermanent. Mm-hmm. But what we can do is deal with the mind level. And when we take care of our minds the best we can, the body will often follow as an effect of taking care of our mental state. And that includes mentally, emotionally, all the levels, spiritually. I mean, all of these things are part of that make up the body. Part of the body is the emotional body. Part of the body is the mental body. But even the mental and emotional body are not perfect oneness with God, which is absolute reality. But that's good news that we're not our bodies, because as we know, so much can happen with the body. Mm-hmm. But, you and I were just taught, we don't have to, we're not going to get into details, but you and I were just talking about how symptoms, all of us at some time or another have symptoms of, right, that we feel.
The body aches, the body is in pain.
The body pains, the body's whatever it is. No one escapes that in this life. Nobody escapes body issues. But if the good news is, if we remember that we can let the body serve the purpose of the Holy Spirit, it's taking it to a whole new level. So that way we're not feeling stuck in a body that seems to be deteriorating, right? Seems to be dying, whatever the situation may be. We don't have to be stuck there because we are so much greater than that. And if we have the faith in that idea, and we start to exercise and invest our faith in spirit, so that becomes more and more our identity, rather than the body being the identity, we are then propelling ourselves forward and moving forward in the awakening process so we don't have to feel so bad, scared, guilty about things that go on in the world or in the body. So there's other ways of looking at what happens in the world and what happens with our bodies. I mean, there's, the Course says there's another way to look at this. And that way is choosing the right mind, is choosing the Holy Spirit's perspective on what the body's for. Because there's two perspectives. There's the ego perspective and the Holy Spirit's perspective. And if we fall into the trap of only buying into what the story the ego's telling us, we're going to feel really scared. And that's one way to know you're even in the ego. Not to feel bad about that. We all do it. It's very easy to be tempted to fall into that trap. And that's understandable when we're identified with the body, that we might feel some fear. But it's good feedback, because it lets us know when we're afraid that, oh, there's something that I can work with here and work on, perhaps changing my attitude about this. I can change the way I'm looking at this, the way I'm thinking about this. So that's where our power is. That's where our power is.
Talking about that, how important is it to train our mind in love permanence?
Love permanence. I like that. Love permanence. Well, to train our mind to really start awakening to that reality that we are love requires work. It does require mental work. And that mental work is first starting with taking responsibility for our thoughts and emotions and feelings. Because if we fall into the trap of projection, when we feel bad about something and we want to blame something outside of us for that, we're falling into a trap that won't be helpful. It'll just perpetuate the feelings of fear, right? Of scarcity, whatever the negative emotion is, it'll just perpetuate it. So we want to forgive ourselves, come back to what we've talked about before, which is so important, is forgiving ourselves when we fall into that, the game of the illusion of that trap of buying into this guilt that we feel over anything that can happen in the world or with our bodies that makes us feel bad, or makes us feel like we are less than or not worthy somehow. We want to watch that, and those are projections onto the self. And we can also project onto other people our fears onto other people. So what we want to do is reverse those projections and catch ourselves when we're thinking with the ego. We will know that we're thinking with the ego because we won't feel happy. We won't feel at peace. We won't feel love. We'll feel fear. So forgiveness is the key to undoing all that and coming back to a place of unconditional love within the self, unconditional love for others, and recognizing that when we are practicing forgiveness, even if it's with other people, we're really forgiving ourselves. There's only one of us. This is coming back to a core idea of the Course, is that no one is out there. Now that's hard to get sometimes, but if this is a projection and a dream, projection of an ego-based thought system of separation, a projection actually means that it's being hurled outside of us, which can't be real, because the source of that is inside. The source of that is the mind. That's why the outside projection can't be real, because it always starts with cause, which is at the mind level. So if we can get that and start practicing that idea and forgiving ourselves for our projections, which means we're forgiving our sense of guilt that comes from this idea we're separate from love itself, God, source. When we're forgiving ourselves for that projection that we're separate, we are returning back to a place of love, to that permanence. But that takes a lot of practice day in and day out with everyday things and situations that come up that disturb our peace. We need to practice with those things that, whether they seem small or big, doesn't matter. Small or big, it's all the same. We're either at peace or we're not. There's no in between. So if we catch ourselves not, or being in a state that we are in a state of fear, that's not peace. So if we can recognize that, then we can go, okay, there's some feedback here for me. This is feedback. And I can change my mind about this. There's another way I can look at this. And this is where the Holy Spirit comes in, the part of the right mind, the part of the mind that tells you a different story of why things are happening. And not only does it tell us a different story of why things are happening, it gives us an interpretation, a different interpretation of why something is happening. And ultimately, that it's not really happening outside of us. We're dreaming it in the mind. And the thoughts, the dream is really a dream that first starts in the mind and then gets projected out. So it seems as if the illusion, the dream, is now happening outside of us. So the world, famous quote, but the world is an outside picture of an inside condition. So the world is an outside picture of an inside condition. The world is just a mirror reflecting back to us our state of being, our state of mind that we're in. So our job would be to, as we look about the world, are we triggered? Are we losing our peace? Are we in a state of fear? If so, we are giving the ego the reins, giving the ego the power to interpret the world for us. That's why we feel bad. But if we say, okay, there's another way to look at the world, I see that's the Holy Spirit's interpretation, which is this world can be used as a classroom to learn our lessons of forgiveness, so that everything that disturbs us becomes an opportunity to forgive ourselves and others. So that's what helps to chip away at the layers of unconscious guilt over feeling that we are lost, that we're separate from love, God. So that way we can start to, again, reinforce the power that we have to choose. Not only choose how we see the world, but choose who we are, where we come from. We're not the product of our parents. Sure, at this level, it feels like, yeah, we're born into this world through the birth canal and we go through, but that's part of the false world. You know, what we really are is created by God in perfect love. And that perfect love never shifts or changes. It never has. In fact, we're still in spirit right here, right now. We're in spirit watching our dreams. And it appears as though we have billions, 8 billion people on the planet. So there's 8 billion separate dreams. That's part of the illusion. If there's only one mind dreaming up that there's 8 billion people out there on a screen somewhere. And that is a projection coming from the part of this one mind that has sided with the ego and has bought into the idea of separation. So that's why we see this splitting of all these different, the whole world was based on that idea of separation. But once everyone starts to accept the atonement for himself, which means you're just coming to that awareness and the recognition that we haven't separated from God, never happened. When we start, each person starts taking responsibility for their projections and forgiveness and practicing that, then the more and more the mind becomes whole again. And when the mind becomes whole, then that mind is returned to God in the seeming end. The whole mind is returned to God. That returning to God is still part of the illusion, though, but we have to kind of appear to go through that returning process because we believe that we're separate. So we have to go through those steps. But love is our absolute reality. It's our true nature that has never shifted or changed, never will shift or change. And it won't ever happen again because it never happened the first time. We will never, ever, right? We have never, ever separated. So that part of it is an experience that will just come when we awaken from the dream, we'll just understand that we've never left heaven. Heaven is now, always has been. That's what now means. It's just an eternal moment of now, eternal present state. There's no past, there's no future. It's all right here, right now. So heaven is that, just that. Perfect love that just extends itself into eternity. And that's what we are. That's what we are.
But tell me about Heaven is Now. What aspect of the book is closest to your heart and why?
Good question. There's many different aspects of this book, different elements of the book, but walking the path of joy, one of my chapters, is to me very dear to my heart because joy is our natural state. And we are worthy of experiencing joy because that is our natural state and we're worthy of it. And I think we have been so trained as we're brought up, born into this world, we learn the opposite of that. We learn to distrust and have faith in that reality. That voice gets turned off, that awareness, that knowledge, that remembering of who we really are gets repressed. And so we learn behaviors, we learn how to feel bad, sad, defeated, unworthy, low self-esteem, all of these things, competition, comparisons with others. That all comes from this deep feeling of guilt. Guilt is the cause of all of that unworthiness. Why guilt? Well, the guilt is because we have denied and repressed this guilt that we really did separate from God. We've denied that. And so that guilt gets projected out and now we see it everywhere here. Instead of joy, we basically are here surviving. It's like a lot of times our lives are about just surviving. And it's now become about our bodies surviving. But what if we withdraw our faith in having the body having to be so perfect, and that the body is not a permanent thing. It's not meant to be permanent. Anyone that right here, right now, listening to this, who feels they're struggling with an illness, it could be cancer, it could be anything. It really doesn't matter. Illness is illness. It is illness is illness.
Yeah.
And anyone struggling, all of us are not meant to be permanent here. The body is not a permanent, reality. What's real is your natural state of joy as God created you. What's real is your natural state of oneness with God, with peace, with innocence, being in a state of grace. That's what's natural. It's unnatural to be in a world and a body. It's no wonder we get symptoms.
Oh, yeah.
In a world of time and space, because that's why we shouldn't feel bad about that. We don't need to feel bad about that because there's a larger script going on. We're all here at this level. There is some truth to the idea that we are working through different themes. And the Holy Spirit would have us we can use, in other words, our scripts that are already done and over and that have already played out. We can use them to remember, look, we each have themes that we choose to explore here. And there are various themes of just hundreds and hundreds of different themes people are choosing to explore. That helps one to not feel like a victim of circumstances, if we can come back to that. And remember that, look, we're choosing this, not at this level, like I want to get sick. No, at another level. This was chosen, and that can be a blow if we're not prepared to look at that. I mean, it can feel like a blow. Why would I choose that? Well, remember, when we're at the spirit level, there's no fear. And when we appear to be born into a world of time and space, we understand at that moment that our life script is going to hold some challenges. We're aware of that already. So we go through it, it seems like we're experiencing things as if it's happened for the first time. And that's just not the case. And I think that actually can be helpful, knowing that, because it doesn't make one feel so bad about it. Oh, well, there's a purpose to this. If I use it, I can help propel me forward and awaken and right and practice, practice the tools to, remember that I am a powerful spiritual being, right? That I get to choose how I'm looking at this, how I'm thinking about this. That's very empowering. And that's the whole point. That's what the illusion of sickness is for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's for when it comes up, is to remind us that we are powerful spiritual beings, that we're not at the effect of the world or bodies unless we decide that we are. We don't have to be. That's what's very powerful about this. So there have been many people that have passed from this world that were enlightened or very advanced. They had cancer. And so that just shows you that cancer doesn't mean you're not spiritual.
Beautiful. Well said. Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with your progress. That's a whole nother level. Who you are is who you are. That won't shift and change. So the story of who you are is just that. It's a story, but not your reality. That's a huge distinction, especially when dealing with an illness of some kind. To make that distinction that I'm not this illness, it doesn't have to define me. Yes, I'm experiencing this illness, but if you're experiencing something, it doesn't mean it's a fact at the highest level that's who you are. It's just what you're experiencing. Two very different things. So that.
Yes, and cancer can really challenge that identity. Or that de-identification process where you say, I'm not my emotions, I'm not my body, I'm not my sickness, I'm not my pain, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my, all of a sudden it can either enhance that process of de-identification with the body and the roles that we play and the thoughts and feelings that we have, or it can bring us back into the encapsulation, the imprisonment in the body. It can literally take you both ways. It's a very powerful device in that sense, for either taking you one way or the other. A great opportunity and a great challenge, and
it can be really challenging. So it's important to allow whatever process you're going through. You don't have to shove it under the rug. You don't have to pretend it's not there. If anything, no, you just look. You can look at it. Who are you looking at it with? You can be honest, be really honest with your feelings. You don't have to push your feelings down. If you feel terrified, look at it. Look at it straight in the face, but ask your inner guide, your inner teacher, the Holy Spirit. If you want to call it something else, that's fine. Higher self. It really is the same. Doesn't matter what you use. A Course in Miracles calls it the Holy Spirit, which is the right part of our minds that understands the truth, knows the truth about us, that knows there's another way that we can, think about things and how we're interpreting, the world and our bodies and ourselves. So we can ask for help. That's so important. Ask for help from that teacher, your inner guide, to help you see it, what's going on from a spiritual perspective, a higher perspective, from what the Course would term it as above the battleground, which means you're watching what's happening. You're not denying it. You're looking, but you're looking at it with a wise elder teacher, brother. It could be Jesus, it could be Buddha, it could be whoever you think or you are inspired by that helps lift your spirit up and remember, right, that truth. So that's what matters is, who are we going through the experience with? We can do it with the ego. And when we do, that's fine. We don't have to feel guilty about that. Just watch what's associated with choosing the ego. what's associated with that are things like, brings upon things like more fear, more guilt, more sadness. It just perpetuates those things when we choose that teacher. But if we watch that, we'll know that, we'll recognize that that's happening. And then we can go, wait, I see what's happening. This is very scary, but I can recognize that I have a choice in the matter of which teacher I'm choosing here, right in this moment. And when I'm ready, I will choose. I can choose again. I can choose again. I can always choose again. And you can. That's the power we have. We don't have power over the body. We have power over how we're thinking about the body. And sure, we have moments where we want to recognize that we can still take care of the body, meaning we just do our part, whatever that means. If it feels good to take in certain foods, vitamins, supplements of any kind, medication, we're not saying don't go to doctors, of course. You can do a combination approach, follow your guidance on what that's telling you. Because when you are in your right mind and you're really asking for help, we can be inspired as to those things at this level and form that can be really helpful to assist us in being well and being healthy. So you don't have to deny, just because we're talking about the mind a lot, we're not saying you have to deny, the body at this level and things that might help assist you in feeling better. I take all, kinds of vitamins. Gabriela and I talk about our foods we eat and things that make us feel good, or why wouldn't we if we have a choice, right?
Yeah.
Why not choose those things that you believe are going to be well for you? That's just common sense.
But just not move with fear. And that's so important.
You don't have to move, but you don't have to move through it. We don't have to with fear.
Cindy, there's a Buddhist saying that says to know and not do is to not yet know. And, we've been friends for a long time, and I know you've been doing. So and you do. And I would like to ask you, when in your conscious awareness have you become more aware and more fundamentally and profoundly aware that you are always at the effect and only at the effect of perfect love?
This, for me personally, that has come more and more with just practicing that idea, practicing forgiveness, practicing right-minded thinking, recognizing those moments if I'm not in my right mind, so I can change my mind, but I have to stop and catch myself and recognize first when I'm not at peace. That's the only way it can really begin. When we have the awareness that we're not at peace and we stop ourselves and go, wait a minute, and you actually recognize, I'm not feeling good right now. I'm not in a good place.
Yeah.
That's the only moment right there where our power is that we can decide against that. We can choose again and choose. So we do have to, it starts with that awareness when we are not happy, when we are not in a peaceful frame of mind, when we feel fear. Fear can take many different forms. It's a big emotion that can show up as anything that you would consider a negative emotion would go under the category of fear.
Totally wonderful. Well said. Happy you said that.
Everything. And love, there's no subdivision. Love is just love. There's no subdivisions of love. I mean, love is just, that's all there is. There's no opposite to love. So love is just itself. So yeah, sure, things can mask themselves as love, but love, you don't have to do anything about love, because what we need to do is undo the false sense of self, the ego, fear. When we're undoing fear-based thoughts, love is our core nature. That will be all that's left. But how to get there is forgiving, true forgiveness. Anything that comes up that disturbs our peace, that rattles us. Yes, it could be an illness, but it could be a relationship issue. It could be a financial issue. Whatever it is that's triggering you is a red flag saying, I got my classroom's in session. What is there that I need to look at here, pay attention to, right? So that I can work with changing my mind about this, and that starts there. That's really important. We have to become aware of when our mood will tell us. There's a line in A Course in Miracles that says your mood will tell you if you're off, right? Which teacher we're choosing at any given moment. We'll know by our mood, our attitude, how we're feeling. That's where feelings can be helpful, because it's feedback. It will tell us where we are in our minds. So, but the mind, again, is where the power really is. So, which is where we want it to be. If it was out there in the world, we wouldn't have any power. We would be at the mercy of a world that's insane. And that is a world of duality that constantly shifts or changes, that we cannot count on. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing we cannot count on, it's this world to make us happy, because the world is in constant flux. It's in constant change. It's not consistent.
Impermanence.
It's impermanent.
Yeah.
But there is a permanence in our minds, our reality, that we still can get in touch with. That's our true nature that we never lose. And the teacher, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, the Course calls it the Holy Spirit, is the voice for God. And everybody has that voice they can turn to and listen to get back in touch with their true nature, the true nature of joy, as we were talking about earlier. We can walk a path of joy by having a happy dream experience, which means we're having a forgiving dream, that we're forgiving those things, those people that push our buttons, the illnesses we experience, we're forgiving all of it. Anything that comes up that triggers us, making it all the same, going, hey, if it disturbs my peace, it disturbs my peace, period, no matter what the cause appears to be. And when we recognize that is a huge leap in our awareness that can help us make the shift. But it takes time, and the illusion of time and practice to undo this ego, this false self that we bought into. Identifying ourselves so heavily with the body.
Yeah.
There's nothing really here in the world that needs to be saved, including the body. It doesn't have to be saved. If we're saving anything, we want to save our minds from the choice for the ego that tells us that a story of fear that we're playing out over and over and over again. We want to be saved from that. That's where true freedom comes, when we no longer feel we need saving, because we are perfect spiritual beings that have never left heaven. And that's it. Yeah.
Cindy, I just want to give you an example, because I think it speaks tons to what you're talking about. For the longest time, I was talking to, I remember liking this phrase, would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? And, Gary in his workshops would say, I know you say you would rather be happy, but the truth is all of us will rather be right. Mm-hmm. And this comes to mind a lot to me when the rubber meets the road and there is an apparent conflict in the world that I'm living. And just recently, and I mean less than a few days ago, I was faced with a situation like this where someone did something, and they were in the wrong, I was in the right. I brought it to their attention, and instead of admitting, they became very angry, very, very angry, and lashed at me. And this is someone that, this is close to me. This is someone obviously that I care about. It's not just some Tom, Dick, and Harry. And I took a moment, I took a step back from the situation. And all of a sudden, I realized exactly what you were saying. And it's not that I didn't realize it before. The difference was this time I owned my realization. And I realized that they were offering me an incredible opportunity, an incredible gift to not fight the battle out there, but to go in my own mind and choose again and realize that the battle has never been outside of myself. The battle has always and will always remain in my own mind. So I need to decide what's going to be, and made the right decision, and acknowledged and forgave myself for the inability to see and act upon that before, and felt such warmth and such instant peace and an instant permanence of peace, as if I've never experienced anything else but peace. And moved from there and approached the individual and actually said, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize the gift that you're bestowing upon me, and tried to give them a glimpse of what I was talking about. It confused the heck out of them.
Wow.
It confused the heck out of them, because I'm not going to go into any speculation as to what that would be. Maybe because they were expecting to fight back. I would fight back because they were in the wrong, and that would have been the proper course of action. But instead, I looked at them with deep, genuine appreciation, and I think I very much confused them, and we continued our friendship from there.
Great example.
And I'm sure that this person has just as much access to Holy Spirit as I do, and I'm sure they will be reflecting and thinking about that and chewing that for a while, because that was a surprise.
Wow. And you brought up such a good point about, in a way, you took the time to take a pause to reflect. That step, I think, needs to happen. To step back when anyone's in a situation where it starts to get a little heated, or there's a projection going on, whatever it's on your end, my end, another person's end, doesn't matter. Who's taking the pause? Who's taking that time to just stop for a second and just take a moment, and just look at what's going on. That's awareness. That's having awareness to be able to stop oneself. And even if you can't do it in the moment, come back to it later, to be able to have the awareness to come back to it. Go, oh, I see and just kind of revisit the situation and look at it to understand what happened and why. That's a form of self-inquiry that needs to happen. Same thing with anything that produces fear, in any form. To be able to take that pause and start questioning. What are those underlying beliefs and interpretations that are causing that fear? And not only that, if the fear keeps coming back for whatever reason, we must keep choosing it for a reason. To feel a certain way. So what benefit is this? I must believe there's some benefit for me to keep this going.
Totally.
Or else I would, look deeper or work with changing my mind about. Sometimes fear can be so great, so big, that I understand it's hard to just turn it around in that moment. That's not always easy to do. And sometimes it can't be done in a certain moment. But at a time when you feel relaxed, more at peace, you can still reflect on it. You can still ask those questions about what the deeper nature is, what it may be serving for you, if anything, why it's there. And do you want, what need do you have to keep it there, to keep holding on to it? In other words, just ask what benefits you might be getting from it. And then, so when you ask those questions, you can get a little bit deeper and closer to the root of what it is that's causing it. Yeah, I know. So the Course does talk about guilt is the cause of all suffering. But we can know that and still keep perpetuating this guilt over and over. So we just want to ask, why are we doing it? What is it again? Why is it? So what I must
What's
believe
in it for us?
somewhere
Yeah.
that it's serving me in some way. I must
Oh,
believe.
totally. Otherwise, you wouldn't choose it.
Or else it
It's
wouldn't
very,
be
very
there.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just want to, that's a good thing to ask.
Yeah.
If it's a control issue, fear of losing control, well, I always like to come back to this idea, well, I'm controlling feeling this way, even if it's fear, I'm controlling that by my choice of thoughts and the choice of teacher I'm choosing in this moment. So
Well said.
So I must have control to choose otherwise if I'm controlling this situation of how I'm thinking. I mean, not the world, but how I'm thinking. We have much more power than I think we give ourselves credit for. And I'm an expert in giving away my power. In other words, I know what that feels like. I've done it over and over in my life with dealing with anxiety. So I know what that feels like to give my power away. So that's why I can speak from some experience. I know what that feels like. And it feels awful. Yeah, it feels awful, everybody.
It does. It does.
Power away. But even if I catch myself doing that, at least I can know, okay, but I don't have to feel guilty for it. Okay, I just look, this is happening, but I'm not guilty. I don't have to buy into that story anymore. Even if I feel the emotion, I can still say, but I know the truth. I know that can make a big difference.
Oh, yes.
Even if I fall into the trap of that emotion, I can still remember the truth. So at least you're right. That I think that's more important than always being perfect. That you always have to be this perfect being, we're all going to make mistakes, so you don't have to be perfect, and we all fall into that sometimes. But the day comes, and the day will come when there will be absolutely no fear at all. That is possible. So Jesus demonstrated that. In a big, what would seem like a big way, he demonstrated that. He taught only love through this idea of the crucifixion, that whole message was teach only love, because that's what you are. That's coming back to this place of permanence. We were talking of this perfect love. If he can demonstrate that when people are driving nails into his wrists, it just says a lot about our true nature, that we all have that much power. He was just demonstrating, and we don't have to follow that extreme example, but we have the same power as he did to choose that for ourselves, no matter what we're going through.
Yeah,
that's very powerful.
And you demonstrate that too through your book, and I think at one point you say that in your book, and I know you said it repeatedly in many conversations you and I had, this idea, because I remember asking you, what's the impetus for writing the book? Why are you writing this book? And it's very clear you said, I'm writing it for myself, and I'm also writing it because my actions and what I'm saying demonstrates what I want to learn, and it's helping other people as well, which is very true. Yeah. So hence the responsibility that we all have. To speak the truth, and if we arrive at that point of realizing, our true nature and the permanence of that nature, to not speak about it, it's not the loving thing. Almost.
Right. It's inspiring to want to share these ideas with people. I would say that's a huge chunk of a piece of why I am writing these books, is because I'm inspired by it, by the messages myself. I get inspired, then I can't help but it needs to be shared. Like it wants to be shared, and for whoever's willing to listen. No one has to listen. Whoever is willing to listen, who wants to listen, to whoever it resonates with, that's all that matters. It's not about forcing ideas on people, but if you resonate with it, there's a reason you're resonating with it. And that's what matters.
And on that tone, one last question before I let you go. So back to Heaven is Now. many of the listeners of this podcast are patients with that have been affected by cancer, and sometimes their families as well. So which of your chapters would you recommend to them, especially if they're struggling? They just got diagnosed, their world literally has been turned upside down, and there's this big C word that seems to be standing between them and anyone. Which chapter would you recommend, and why? From Heaven is Down.
The title might seem interesting, why I'm recommending this chapter, but the title is, and the Oscar goes to, chapter 8.
Yeah.
So maybe that will ignite some interest. And the Oscar goes to. There are some things in that chapter and some very relevant quotes that have to do with illnesses, where I quote Jesus in A Course in Miracles. And that chapter has a chunk of information about how one can look at having an illness from a right-minded perspective. Not that, again, it's not about denying your experience or denying the body, but it's about giving you your power back so that you're not at the effect of an illness, so that the illness becomes your identity, so that the illness is starting to define you. So that chapter has a lot of stuff in there that could be helpful. All the chapters, of course, have things that can be helpful, but I'd say that one has a chunk of things.
Yeah, you're pouring your heart out in that chapter, talking about and linking this idea of mind and body and choice.
And one more, just to throw out, if you want to single out, just one more chapter would be like the using your life as a classroom chapter. So the first one was chapter 8, and the Oscar goes to, and then the other chapter is chapter 4, your life as a classroom, tools for awakening from the dream. There's a lot of things and exercises and thought processes in that chapter that are actually practical things people can do to practice a different mindset, while being normal here and doing what you need to do here at this level to take care of yourself. But there's also great tools in there. So
yes, that chapter does have some very practical solutions as to how you can access your God mind or your holy mind or your love mind, and it's a very intimate process when you do that, because you need to navigate through the noise that the chattering mind is creating all the time, and be able to anchor yourself in that centeredness and in that certainty of knowing that you are not a body, that you are free, and you'll never lose your reality somehow. We're just in the midst of starting this whole new program, Cancer Pep, which is a patient empowerment program, and in one of the episodes that we created, was a whole education session. We talked about, Rob and I, about just how absurd this whole thought is that we could actually just be a body, and the body dies, and that's it. It's over.
Yeah, that's so
absurd.
So absurd. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense, really.
No.
It doesn't make sense. And something just came to me. Before we finish, I wanted to say to anyone going through any illness or anything, that for all of us really, because we've all had our own things, but how do we know that our illness is not there to serve the purpose of helping also others awaken? How do we know that our illness is not there? In other words, to serve the purpose of being a great teacher to someone else. So it's just, everything's connected. There's no accidents.
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful thing to know. If there's no accidents, there's no victims. If there's no accidents, there's no victims, right? That has to go together.
Totally.
There's no accident, there's no victim. So how do we know whatever the illness isn't serving some higher purpose that's helping another loved one or someone else work through their fears too? This is all has a chain effect. So how we're being within our own selves makes all the difference.
Yeah, because it pauses the show. It pauses the show. It pauses the chattering mind. It pauses all those premises that we created on the basis of which, we make sense of this reality. Pauses everything. Everything is suspended, and we say, what the heck is going on with anybody? Tell me, call the name of the game for me, because what's going on? What is real? Who am I? And how do I explain a lot of things that I feel that are not necessarily the subject of conversation on a daily basis? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Cindy, thank you so much. This has been wonderful as always.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll see each other again, and the conversation will continue. But thank you so much for taking the time today. Love you with all my heart.
Love you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this concludes my conversation with Cindy Lora-Renard, author of Heaven is Now. For more information on Cindy's work, please visit her website at www.cindylora.com. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, be well and take care of yourselves.